Hi folks, welcome again to another episode of Pro Football in the 1970s. I'm your host Joe Zagorski. Now, thanks to the Sports History Network, a signed copy of my new book, The 2003-Yard Odyssey, The Juice, The Electric Company, and an Epic Run for a Record will be given away to one lucky fan. It's all about the 1973 Buffalo Bills. Please check out the Sports History Network online for details on how you can win a free copy of my new book on the 1973 Buffalo Bills. Thanks a lot for listening in to today's episode, folks. Look forward to chatting with you again soon in the future. Take care.
This is Basketball History 101 with Rick Loayza.
Welcome back to award-winning Basketball History 101, part of the Sports History Network. I am your host, Rick Loayza, and this is the podcast where we bring to life some of the forgotten stories from basketball history. We are bringing old school basketball to a new school audience, and today we bring you the story of Bill Garrett. He was the first black player in the Big Ten Conference in college basketball. Now, we have done similar stories like this. Back in episode 43, we covered Don Barksdale, the first black NBA All-Star. We also did episode 64, where we covered Chuck Cooper, Earl Lloyd, and Nat Clifton, the three men who together broke the NBA color barrier. Then there was episode 109, where we covered Perry Wallace, the first black player to play in the Southeastern Conference when he suited up for Vanderbilt University. Now, Bill Garrett played at Indiana University in the late 1940s and early 1950s and broke the color barrier of the Big Ten Conference. But getting to Indiana was not that easy. He had actually enrolled elsewhere and then transferred to Indiana. However, let us start at the beginning of the story. He was born on April 4th, 1929 and was raised in Shelbyville, Indiana. Now, Bill was the oldest of four children born to Leon and Laura Garrett. Now, at the time, Indiana was still segregated. There were public bathrooms and water fountains that were for whites only and blacks only. Restaurants, movie theaters, hotels, even certain stores were still segregated. And this is the background that Bill grew up in. Now, there was also World War II going on, and it ended around the time that Bill was 16 years old and in the middle of high school. Now, one of the things that he had going in his favor was that he had two parents who emphasized education. Bill and his three siblings were all good students and all had the goal of attending universities and getting degrees, with or without sports. Now, Bill grew up to be quite athletic. Although not very tall by today's standards, he grew to a height of 6'2", which made him the center at his high school. But if he wanted to play at the next level, he was going to have to develop other skills. He was easily the best player at Shelbyville High School, which was an integrated school. Garrett played alongside two other black players, Emerson Johnson and Marshall Murray, and all three of them were in the starting lineup, which was highly unusual in those days. Back in the 1940s and 1950s, the unwritten rule was that a team played only one black player at a time while at home, two on the road, and three if you were behind and needed to catch up. But Coach Frank Barnes did not care about any of that. He started three black players for Shelbyville, and that's the way it was. In one way, it made sense. Coach Barnes was not from Indiana. At the time that he took the job at Shelbyville High School, he had been honorably discharged from the Army after having served in World War II. He was in his 40s and single with no kids. Now, that fact is that he got to be that old with no family was probably more unusual than the fact that he started three black players on a basketball team. But Coach Barnes simply put out his best starting five, and it just so happened that three of them were black. That is how he looked at it. Now, that is a great thing for Garrett, Johnson, and Murray. However, as you can imagine, Bill Garrett had to put up with a lot from opposing fans, especially when they were playing in the other team's gym. Now, I'm not going to say what they said, but as you can imagine, they said the worst thing that you can yell at a black player. And he heard that constantly from opposing fans. Also, the fouls against him were harder. An elbow here, a scratch there. He took quite a bit of physical abuse from the opposing players trying to intimidate him. It was absolutely awful what he had to endure in the late 1940s in Indiana. The opponents were also constantly trying to provoke him into fighting. And there was one reason why. Bill Garrett was ahead of his time in terms of basketball skills. He was quick, strong, and could jump. He was the leading scorer for his team and one of the best players in the entire state of Indiana. It made sense for the opponent to try to get him into a fight because then he would be out of the game and the opponent might have a chance at actually beating Shelbyville. By the time he was a senior in 1947, he was considered the best player in the entire state of Indiana. The only other player getting that kind of attention was a 6'10" kid from Terre Haute, Indiana by the name of Clyde Lovellette. And you might know that name because Lovellette went on to be a 3-time NBA champion with the Hawks and the Celtics. He is also in the Hall of Fame. But back in 1947, he was the only other player giving Bill Garrett a run for Player of the Year honors. Their two teams played each other early in that senior season, with Lovellette's team, Garland High School, winning the game. Bill Garrett and his team should not have lost, and they wanted that one back desperately. If they wanted to repay the boys from Garfield, then they would have to do it in the state championship tournament at the end of the season. And I'll be right back with the state tournament.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
At the Sports History Network, we're all about sports yesteryear, and so we're so pleased to introduce you to Row 1, an online memorabilia gallery and shop that brings your sports history to life anywhere. The Row 1 gallery includes over 5,200 gorgeously reproduced prints of team posters, game program covers, game tickets, advertisements, and more in baseball, pro and college football, pro and college basketball, and more. And any gallery item may be printed in a variety of sizes on wood, metal, canvas, acrylic, or poster paper. And in Row 1 shop, check out the thousands more of unique items with the retro and historical designs dating back to 1876, including t-shirts, long sleeve shirts, phone cases, mugs, blankets, pillows, towels, and even shower curtains. Go to sportshistorynetwork.com, ROW1, for access to the full Row 1 catalog and for gallery prints and gift items, plus get a 15% discount off all prints on the Row 1 Pictorum Gallery with coupon code SHN15. Follow the link on the show notes.
Hello, sports history fans. I'm Ross from the podcast Pigskin Tales. You're about to jump into another thrilling sports history moment, but first, let's dive into today's sponsor, just in time for the holiday season. Introducing Art of Words, the brainchild of word artist Dan Duffy from Philadelphia. Dan meticulously crafts stunning images by handwriting relevant words from some of the greatest sports moments in time. These unique, budget-friendly illustrations are the perfect gift, sparking cherished memories and capturing hearts. Choose from city skylines, sports, history, and musicians to find a piece for everyone. And here's the exciting part. For that sports fanatic in your life, gift them a piece of their favorite team or player's history. Art of Words tells a compelling story. Explore collegiate stadiums, each meticulously crafted with every football victory etched into words. Or venture into baseball stadiums, handwritten with every player from the team's illustrious history. My favorite on the site is Bryce Harper 2021 MVP year. Because I'm a big stats guy, I think that's one of the coolest things ever. Check it out. Don't wait. Order a print today for yourself and your loved one this holiday season. Transform your wall into a gallery of captivating art and surprise your family and friends with a print of their own. Use code SHN15 at artofwords.com for a 15% discount on your order in November and December. Visit Art of Words, where words magically transform into stunning art, evoking cherished memories and touching the hearts of those who you care about. Again, use the code SHN15 for 15% off at artofwords.com.
Welcome back to the show, and let us continue with the story of Bill Garrett. Before the break, we shared that Garrett's team, Shelbyville, had lost an early season game to Garfield, which featured future Hall of Famer Clyde Lovellette. The Shelbyville team pretty much rolled through the rest of their schedule with relative ease. Now, as I mentioned before the break, Bill Garrett was considered the best player in the entire state of Indiana. At the end of the regular season, his team was ranked number 21 in the state as they prepared to start the playoffs. Now, I need to pause the story here for just a second to talk about how they did the playoffs in the state of Indiana back then. Now, most other states divide up their state championship into different divisions. The big schools all play in the top division, small rural schools play in their own smaller division, and in some states, the religious schools play in their own separate division. Essentially, most states give out 5 or 6 different state championships for the various divisions in their state. But in Indiana, they did not do that back then. Every school, big or small, rural or inner city, white or black, all played in one big division. And it seems that nearly every high school got to participate. In 1947, the year that we're talking about, there were nearly 800 high schools participating in the end of the year state tournament. Teams had to first win their section, then the sub-regional, then the regional, and finally the state tournament. This was a gauntlet of a tournament. To win the entire state championship, a team would have to win 9 or even 10 straight games. Shelbyville High School was in a position that they would have to win 10 straight single elimination games in a row in order to become the champions of Indiana. The early rounds were relatively easy, assuming that they were prepared to play, and they were. However, the games would get more difficult as the later rounds came on. They began their quest by defeating Mount Auburn by 40. Then it was Waldron by 29, Columbus by 12, since they were actually a good team. Then it was Franklin Township by 33, Madison by 7, North Vernon by 32, Clinton by 9, and Lawrenceburg by 6. And that put them into the state semifinals against Washington. While all of this was happening over several weeks, the boys from Shelbyville kept an eye on Garfield, which was also rolling through their part of the tournament, and Garfield was in the other semifinal. Shelbyville defeated Washington by 8, and that set up a rematch with Garfield where they would have to play for the state championship. Garfield's strategy was to double team Garrett and make someone else beat them. On the other side of the court, Garfield just kept feeding Lavellette. I mean, who wouldn't? The guy was 6'10" and highly skilled. For a while, it worked as Garfield had a small lead at halftime. But in the second half, the team from Shelbyville turned it on. And they also got a break when Lavellette fouled out of the game with a few minutes left. That allowed Shelbyville to close out strong and win the game by a score of 68-58. They were the champions of Indiana, and that is a special thing. For his efforts, Bill Garrett was officially named Indiana's Mr. Basketball as the best high school player in the state. But where to go next? He was not that highly recruited simply because he was black. Several of his teammates had gotten scholarships, but not him. He ended up accepting a scholarship to Tennessee State University, an all-black school in Nashville. But an angel was at work behind the scenes, and that angel was named Faburn DeFrance, who was at work on Garrett's behalf. DeFrance did not even know Garrett. DeFrance was the director of the Senate Avenue YMCA in Indianapolis, the largest all-black YMCA in the United States. DeFrance had seen Garrett play in the state finals and knew that he was perfect to be the first player to break the color barrier at the Big Ten Conference. And DeFrance had a lot of influence in the black community. His official job was director of a YMCA, but he was really more like a civil rights leader. So he set up separate meetings with the president and head basketball coach at Indiana University. The president was hesitant to become the first school to have a black basketball player, but then DeFrance reminded him that the school already had black players playing on their football team. So why was it so different with basketball? And DeFrance had a point. Indiana itself and the rest of the Big Ten already had black football players on everybody's team. The president agreed and said that they would be happy to have Garrett, assuming that he qualified academically and that the head coach agreed to have him on the team. The president was not going to make that basketball decision. So now that he had the president's sign off, DeFrance had to work on the head coach, Branch McCracken. McCracken was also hesitant to bring in Garrett. McCracken was familiar with Garrett and knew full well that he was a great player and he had the skills necessary to be on the team. That part was not a problem. What McCracken was worried about was that the other teams might forfeit games rather than play against them. And that was a real consideration back then. But in the end, McCracken also agreed to have Garrett on board as an Indiana Hoosier. Now DeFrance had to get in touch with Garrett, who had already enrolled at Tennessee State. In the state of Indiana, it is nearly every basketball player's dream to suit up in the red and white of Indiana University. So DeFrance got in touch with Garrett and told him that there was a spot at Indiana if he wanted it. Of course he wanted it. So he left Tennessee State and enrolled at Indiana when it was still very early in the school year. Now, near the top of the episode, I mentioned that Garrett was an excellent student, so doing the academic work required of him at Indiana was no problem. Coach McCracken then took the extra step of finding Garrett a roommate and mentor. He chose Jim Robertson, who was a junior at Indiana, but he was a bit older as he had already served as a Tuskegee Airman in World War II and was at Indiana studying for his medical degree. Now, that was a great way of helping Garrett adjust to campus life. At Indiana, traveling on the road, there were a few cities where Garrett had to stay in a separate hotel from the rest of the team, or when he could stay, he had to be escorted by a white teammate anytime he was walking around the hotel, and he had to put up with a lot as a player playing for Indiana. His teammates began to empathize with him as they saw clearly what was happening to their teammate, and most of his teammates took turns rooming with him on the road where he was allowed to stay in the same hotel as the team. In 1951, his senior year, Bill Garrett was named an All-American as one of the top college players in the entire country, and that was huge for him. The NBA had integrated the year before, so there was a very real chance that he could be drafted into the NBA and have a professional basketball career. In the 1951 NBA draft, the Boston Celtics selected Bill Garrett. But then the Korean War started, and Garrett enlisted in the Army. He spent 2 years serving in Korea before being discharged, and upon his return in 1953, he reported to the Boston Celtics training camp. But after a few days of camp, he was released. But it was not the end of basketball for Bill Garrett. The Globetrotters came calling and signed him up. Unfortunately, Garrett broke his wrist early in the Globetrotter season and he did not play very much. Also, the idea of playing exhibition games where the outcome was already fixed and the point was really more to entertain just did not sit well with him. He wanted to play some real competitive basketball, and that was not what the Globetrotters were offering. So after a year, he left to get his master's degree back at Indiana University. And in the meantime, he had also gotten married and settled down in Indianapolis to start a family. After a year of working in a foundry while he finished his master's degree, he was offered the head coaching position at Crispus Attucks High School in Indianapolis, and that was the all-black high school that Oscar Robertson had led to 2 Indiana State titles. But Garrett took the job after Oscar had already graduated, and he entered Crispus Attucks High School in 1957, and by 1959, he led Attucks all the way to a state title, and that made Bill Garrett the only person to win the Indiana State Basketball Championship as both a player and a coach. Now, after great success at Attucks, he applied for the head coaching position at his alma mater, Indiana University, when the job became available. And he was seriously considered, but he lost the job to Bob Knight. Garrett landed at another school with a very long name. Both Purdue University and Indiana University had extension campuses in Indianapolis, and since they were both state schools, they decided to merge their Indianapolis campuses into a single campus that today is still known as Indiana University, Purdue University at Indianapolis, or IUPUI. Today, it still runs its own Division I basketball team separate from Indiana or Purdue. And Garrett did not coach there. He was the assistant dean of student activities. However, it was a job that he loved. Unfortunately for Garrett, he passed away rather early of a heart arrhythmia in 1974. He was at a hardware store buying a pane of glass to replace one of the windows in his home when he suddenly collapsed. He was only 45 years old. The following year, Shelbyville High School named their new gym after Bill Garrett. He was a good man who broke barriers, and he should be remembered for his contributions to basketball, especially in the state of Indiana. Earlier this year, I was able to attend a basketball game at Indiana University and was able to take a good look at the statue of Bill Garrett that they have in the lobby of the arena. He made it possible for future players like Quinn Buckner and Isaiah Thomas to win championships at Indiana. Well, that is all for today. Join us next time when we share our 200th regular episode. It is an amazing milestone for us, and we cannot wait for that episode to come out. We will cover the story of Kobe's 81-point performance. That's next time on Basketball History 101, part of the Sports History Network, the headquarters of Sports Yesteryear. Go to sportshistorynetwork.com to find out more about this and other sports history podcasts. If you like what you hear, please hit that subscribe button wherever you get your podcast. And check out our page on Facebook. It's called Basketball History 101 Podcast. There you will find shorter historical posts as well as comments and discussion starters on today's game. I'll also announce there when new episodes come out. I want to thank my producer and editor, Jacob Loayza. Join us each week as we continue to mine the history of basketball for more great stories from the past. Take care and see you soon.
Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, aka the Football History Dude, and I hope that you enjoyed this recent episode presented by the Sports History Network and were able to learn some good old-fashioned sports history knowledge nuggets. I started the Sports History Network back in 2020 with the mission to help podcasters find a community of like-minded sports history nerds as well as helping aspiring podcasters to start their own shows. We have a little bit over 30 shows on the network right now covering all sorts of sports history, but as far as I'm concerned, we're just at the toothpick in the ocean moment, that can't even figure it out because there's so much more coming. We wanted to create the ultimate headquarters for sports yesteryear, starting with Podcast Network and our website, but we're going to continue to move into other mediums as well. And here's the cool part, because we want you to be part of our team. So if you're interested in starting your own podcast, or maybe being a guest on one of our shows, or who knows, maybe even writing an article for us over on the website. Seriously, all you gotta do is reach out to us on the contact page over at sportshistorynetwork.com. You can be as technologically savvy as a Neanderthal tapping on a stone trying to figure out this whole hieroglyphics thing back in the day. Again, it doesn't matter, because even if you don't understand the whole podcast space, we have a production team that can pretty much help you out with doing everything. All you gotta do, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com, head to the contact page, fill it out. That message goes right to me, and I'll reach out to you as soon as I can. But for now, dude, I'm through if you're through.